Hello and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host. And as you can see, if you're watching the video, we have our very favorite Dr. Elizabeth Cohen back with us today. And I'm so happy, Dr. Elizabeth, that you are back. We just spent a little bit of time catching up and talking about what our topic would be today. And I have to tell you, these episodes where you come on are a gift for me as well as my listeners, because your insights on, the issues around divorce, the emotional issues around divorce are helpful, but really just on that broad spectrum of everything that we are dealing with in life. And you and I were talking about it. So first, as always, let me thank you for taking the time to come here and speak with me and my listeners.
Oh, Susan, thank you so much for having me. And I think it is so amazing that you give these broader topics time on your podcast, because I just see how much you're holding and containing and taking care of your audience. So thanks for having me and so I can be part of that.
Yeah, well, and you are a huge part of it. The episodes that I've done that go beyond really sort of the divorce scope often include you. We've had some wonderful episodes on a myriad of issues talking about depression and anxiety, divorce, depression and anxiety, and COVID. And most recently, you and I got together back in March of this year, 1 year of COVID, and we were talking about the emotional content around the emergence from quarantine, the emergence from the pandemic, because in March and April, things were looking hopeful. Things were looking, vaccines had come out. I think I had just gotten one of mine. I then got my second one. I know you had gotten yours. And I was really feeling kind of, like it's over. Yeah. Life is going to start again. And now we're here in September and we're back in quarantine in many cases. I was just explaining to you, Chicago is full on masking again, full on social distancing in restaurants and public places. And I'm back in my house, back staying inside. And the world has gotten even more difficult around these topics because people are now becoming very polarized around the issue. So, I wanted to talk to you about this because I feel like there's a huge trauma component to this. There's a huge emotional component to this. I know members of my own family are struggling with mental health issues because of this and the extension of this. We were talking about how hard it is, it's been on children and families. So, let's just dive in. What are you seeing around all of, how people are feeling and the difficulties of having to go back into quarantine?
Yeah, such an perfect.
Hold on once. I'm going to stop it.
Yeah. So good at all. Okay. Okay. Ready?
Yes.
Okay. So I was just reflecting that my private practice in New York City is seeing double the amount of referrals that we saw even last year at this time. And I want to say to the audience that one of the emotions, we've talked about how anger is one of the emotions people struggle with. Another one is disappointment. And I think that a lot of people are uncomfortable saying what you were just sharing, that, dang, I'm so disappointed. Like in March and April, we were told we were on a certain course. I remember I live in New York City when we didn't have to wear masks in the elevator and in the lobby. And so walking the dogs, I didn't have to try to get the dogs and the mask and the sunglasses and the phone. And I thought, this is freedom. Is this really happening? I really felt like, you have to pinch me. This can't really be happening. So there was a part of me, and I think a lot of us, that was protective, kind of unsure. And many people deal with uncertainty in different ways.
Right.
So some people, myself included, deal with uncertainty with more anxiety. So I'm cautious about it. Some people deal with uncertainty with like, you never know, I'm just going to do it. Right. So we talked about like some of these people who were just doing everything as if it was completely over without any precautions. And I think the question, and this is I think this is a time really of life lessons, because COVID is a microcosm for the struggles of life. We were just talking about some of our personal ones, right?
Yes.
Right. So when you get disappointed, when things become uncertain, when things change for the worse, how do you manage that? And do you let yourself have your feelings? Do you let yourself feel deeply disappointed? A client of mine just said to me, we're recording this the week after the first Jewish holiday of Rosh Hashanah. Tomorrow is Yom Kippur. And they said, this is the second high holidays that most of the temples have been streaming live.
Right.
And I have chills when I say that, because this chronicity, like this feeling of still in it, is painful in and of itself. But as you pointed out, when you thought you were going to be out of it. And as we're talking, I'm so reminded of the divorce process, right? This feeling of, right? Like I have a client now, like we were 3 weeks away from signing. We were about to be done, whatever that meant. And then something else came in, doesn't want to pay for private school or something, like go back to mediation or back to court. That feeling of being disappointed that something you thought was going to happen isn't happening. That is an experience that we have to be connected to and understand and process. And I think people have lots of different ways of processing it.
And that's, as you're saying this, I'm thinking about that, this experience that we're all going through right now is truly a microcosm of dealing with disappointment, dealing with when things don't work out the way that we think they're going to work out. And that happens in divorce, as you just described. So many people out there who are listening can probably say, yeah, I thought we had an agreement and then they walked it back, or something else came up. And it happens for us in so many ways in our lives. I think there's something about this particular instance with COVID, because of the extremes involved, and because of you called it an existential trauma in one of our episodes on this. I think that it's so heightened. Yeah. And so with that have come additional heightened emotions. And that goes back to that, although there's a lot of disappointment, there is a lot of anger going on for people right now. I mean, you see these, and I don't want to get into the discussion of it. And, we have our viewpoint on it. That's not what I want to talk about. But what I see over and over again, both in people on the street who start arguing about something, and like the school boards arguing about mask policy, such anger, irrational anger, on both sides, maybe. So what's going on with that anger?
Yeah. So this is a very shrink answer, but I'm going to say it, which is that, because that's what else can I do? That's the only kind of answers I can have. I believe that what's happening is anger and trauma, the fight response, is coming out sideways. That people are not really allowing themselves to sit with a safe person, a peer, a family member, a clergy member, and talk about their disappointment, and the fear and the trauma. And when we don't do that, it comes out sideways, and we get angry at the school or the administration or the person down the street. I just heard yesterday was the first day that New York enforced you have to be vaccinated to go indoors to a restaurant. And I think there were like 100 restraining orders already filed. I mean, it's like people are just so understandably traumatized and angry and upset, and it's coming out in all these ways. And you see that in divorce too, right? Like that if you don't, we talked about this, like if you don't process your own feelings, they come out sideways at your lawyer or at, somebody who you're buying your coffee from. That we have to own our feelings. And I think we haven't, really allowed ourselves to own the pain and the disappointment. Fear is in the media. So I guess we talk about that a little bit more, and anger is in the media, but like real disappointment, real sadness, grief. I mean, that's the other piece, right, Susan, that we've talked about, but I just heard the number, which is astonishing, of how many people have passed from COVID. Like we are sitting and marinating in grief. And if
Yeah.
if you know anyone who hasn't processed their grief, as therapists, we call it complicated grief. It's anger that you see. And so we all have grief for what's happening. In January 2020, we thought the next few years were going to be very different. We've had to grieve so much. And I think you can either lean into that grief or be so resistant to acknowledging it that it comes out sideways as rage and anger.
Yeah. So you say it and it makes so much sense to me, because we have talked about this in the context of divorce, in that you cannot tamp down your feelings. You have to, I think the phrase you used was, you have to feel it to heal it. You have to, bring your emotions out, acknowledge them, and deal with them in order to heal from them, or they just fester and come out in that sideways fashion. But I think another complicating factor is how hard it is to get help right now. How you just said, how busy is your practice right now?
I mean, I'm trying to hire 2 new people to see more clients. I mean, it's just because the other piece is that we've been in this hyper vigilant. So separate from the disappointment of what happened in March, we have been in a constant cortisol infused nervous system for now 18 months. And that does something to your ability to problem solve, to relax, to sleep, to eat, to be in relationships. We are in a chronic state of trauma right now. And the other feeling that is coming up a lot is this feeling of a foreshortened future, which is actually a symptom of depression that we use to categorize it. But it's so clear. It's like people can't plan anything. Right. And planning and getting excited for things is a very important coping strategy for difficult feelings, and people don't have that. So the feelings are being tamped down and there's no outlet. That's, a recipe for an explosion.
Which is all we see people having
see people having now. My kids just went back to school after 18 months, and we got the most beautiful email from the principal on the first day, early in the day, and said, I wanted today to be a day of re-entry, reconnecting, and safety. I totally screwed up, and it wasn't that. I am so sorry. I take full responsibility. It was the most admirable, honest, email. So many parents were enraged. Of course, they haven't been in school for 18 months. It's COVID. They're humans, right? We don't allow, if we don't allow our feelings, we're going to take everything out on other people. And we're going to think they're the reason for our problem. Other people are not the reasons for our problems. It's appropriate to have problems with a global pandemic.
We just don't want to have them anymore. We 100%. Wanted them to go away, and that's the disappointment, right? 100%. We wanted this to be over.
And here's the thing, the more you hook your anger into another person, the longer it lives. Kind of like COVID, I guess.
Yep. Yeah. Hate to laugh, but very true.
Exactly. If you let it run through you and you think, wow, of course I'm angry. Of course I'm so frustrated that I can't do these things. Just to sit with it. I've shared with your audience before, sitting with emotions, 90 seconds, it will move through you. COVID won't be over, but you won't be so triggered, and that feeling won't be so close to the surface all the time. You will allow it to be processed and metabolized, and you might have to process it over and over and over. And that is okay. That's what going through life is. If anyone's faced a divorce, an illness, a loss of a family member, a crisis, that's what it is. It's 1 hour at a time, allowing yourself to feel the feelings.
Yeah. There's something I'm just thinking as we're talking here, you just said we've been in COVID for 18 months. It's been an up and down bumpy ride. Well, guess what else kind of looks like that? The divorce process. The 18 months is kind of average. Yep. Up and down is kind of average. Lots of negative emotions, kind of what happens in divorce.
Not knowing what your future is going to look like. And this kind of everyone's going to be great. We're going to re-enter, are those days when you go on an awesome date and you think, thank God I'm divorced. This is so great. And then that relationship doesn't work out and you think, oh my God, why did I get divorced? I should have stayed together. Yes, these are the ups and downs of a hugely traumatic experience that you're going through. Like, it's normal to feel these ups and downs, and they suck. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm feeling them too, but just not pushing them away and not putting them on somebody else.
Yeah, which is, where I think it is and certainly, the media has that tendency to sensationalize things, but they have a lot to sensationalize right now.
Yes.
There's an awful lot going on. So for those who are listening, because this is your gift, for those who are listening, who are saying, wow, this is all ringing true for me.
Mm-hmm.
I am feeling anger. I am feeling disappointment. I am feeling the trauma and the ongoing, just bumpy ride here. What can they do?
Yeah. So here, I was just about to say, I want to give some tools to people. So first of all, acknowledging that this is a difficult time is important. So I recommend to my clients, when reconnecting to someone, or someone texts you and says, how's it going? Always put in a sentence like, as you can imagine, it's a bumpy road. Like some sort of acknowledgement of the challenge. It doesn't have to be things are terrible, but just acknowledging the mixed bag. Something like, doing pretty well today, yesterday was another story, or I have no idea how tomorrow will be. So really just, as a cognitive therapist, I really emphasize how your thoughts impact how you feel, and what you say impacts how you feel. So allowing in your words to hold the golden and of having a great day, really wish though that I could be doing more, or something like that, is important for helping your nervous system get used to this and. So that's the first thing. The second thing that we think we talked about this before, is for people to understand that there is no one person who is making your situation worse. I mean, same with the divorce. Like, even if you're pro-mask, anti-mask, pro-vax, anti-vax, that situation is not what's making everything worse. There is not one thing that is making everything worse. And if you find that watching the news, hearing about somebody on the opposite side enrages you, please don't listen to it. We don't need more angry people. We need more action. We need more connection. We need more people. And there are people working on that. You're probably not, I'm not sure, maybe you are, but you're probably not that person. And so protect your nervous system and all the other people who you spend time with who are impacted by your nervous system. Don't go there. Our nervous system in trauma has this desire to understand and to go towards the pain so it can kind of fix it and make it better. So watching something that how many times I shouldn't read this, or I shouldn't listen. Don't
exactly. Do not turn the news on. Right. This is a rule in our house, and has been sadly for like 5 years, 6 years. So no more news. We just don't watch it.
Right. If you have your state's, text on your phone where you get announcements about something you need to know, just be kind to your nervous system. And anytime you find yourself thinking, it won't be that bad, it will be that bad. We are terrible. Cognitive science shows we are terrible at assessing how much something will impact us. We minimize how things impact us, and they impact us so much more. So that's the cognitive one. The behavioral one is about avoiding. The other one that I just want to let people know is that connecting and being with other people on Zoom or in other spaces is so essential for getting through a traumatic time. We want to tend and befriend. We want to connect, and we want to feel supported. And we all have burnout. Like, we all have Zoom burnout. So pick up the phone and go for a walk and chat with your friend. Do something that connects you to the present moment. A lot of what happens in trauma is we try to figure out what's going to happen in the future. We ruminate about the past or other people. The number one technique I've been telling all my clients is, what's happening in your life right now, and what can you control in your day to day? Just bringing it right back into you, because we get so focused on others and the bigger picture. And again, unless you're on Biden's COVID-19 committee, which if you are, also holler, like, so glad you're here. But if you're not, like, you don't have to be following, like, you need to be focusing on what's happening in your life. What do you need to be doing to be kinder to yourself? What do you need to be doing for your, if you have children or family members that you're care to take care of them? Get back into your life. Get out of everyone else's business, because we know you can't control that anyway.
Right. I mean, it's so interesting to me how this so closely parallels the divorce process or any other, traumatic event that might come along in our lives. And, how many times have we said, you can only control yourself, you can't control others. I mean, it's amazing how our, what rings true in one situation carries over to other situations.
And just to kind of vent for a minute, I feel really frustrated that some places, some schools still have home ec, or where you learn how to, build a stool, my kid's friend was doing, or bake something, but not emotion regulation skills. Not what do you do when things get hard, because part of this is we're all thinking, wait, we've been promised that everything's supposed to be easy all the time or good all the time. I mean, especially if you're from a systemically oppressed group, you that is not your experience. But as a privileged white person, that has certainly been my experience. Like, things should just be easy. So when I had my divorce and when COVID, it's like, what is this? It's like, this is life, but we weren't taught emotion regulation skills. And that's why I think so many people are coming to therapy now, because they need the skills, and we don't teach that to our children.
No. And that's another great point here, is because we've been talking about what you can do for yourself, but for those who have family members who are struggling. I have a few members, as I mentioned, of my family who, COVID has exacerbated already pre-existing mental health conditions. And it's very, very difficult for them. And it's very difficult for them to find help. But one of the things that we can do is share these tips that, as simple as they sound to people. And I know, for me, a simple tip is the best tip because it's easy to apply. Here, you've given us 3 quick tips that can be applied, not just in your life, share them with your kids. Help your kids as they're going through this, because, if we want to talk about our generation being, thinking that everything was supposed to be easy, I have to tell you, the younger generation, where everything's been available to them in, Amazon delivers, and I can download the movie I want and watch it in 2 seconds, and somebody can send me money, this 18 months of ongoing torture, where they can't even leave their house or go to school or see their friends. Just imagine what that's been like for them.
Right. And to really, for anyone in your life who's struggling, and anyone you're in charge of caring for, or you love, first ask them what kind of support they need. Similarly to if you're going through a divorce, we can't assume what anyone needs. I mean, some people will say, I need to get out of the house. Some people don't want to get out of the house. Some people might feel more comfortable with a phone call. Like, really be curious. And I think this is the other thing we've gotten. So I don't know. We talked about this earlier. Like, if you're doing an event, or if you're spending time with anyone, it's like, if you have your ideas, they're supposed to match up with the other person. They don't have to match up with the other person. This is in some ways a very good practice, especially for women, on asserting their needs. Like, I'm a mask person. If you don't want to wear a mask, that's cool for you, but I am. Like, it's actually a really good practice teaching kids how to, and yourself, how to advocate for yourself and not judge. And just say, I don't feel comfortable here. I don't feel safe. I mean, this is a consent conversation, essentially. And so learning how to do that, and learning how to deal with someone's response.
Without arguing, or without getting angry, without turning it into a life, or, a knockdown, drag out. I mean, we've seen the people who are grabbing other people's masks and ripping them off their face, and, the threats and violence. And, I think that's really important what you just said there, that when, you are faced with these situations where you are feeling that it's not the way you want it to be, you have the choice to remove yourself. You have the choice to not be a part of that particular, whatever that might be. You have choices other than arguing with people, because that's the other thing, right?
Which doesn't work.
That's exactly. It doesn't work.
decades and decades of research on conflict resolution, you know this better than me, will tell you that arguing does not get two people on the same page and that it takes a lot of time for people. So give it up, like give it, unless you want to go into this professionally, like please give up the fighting this one person. And I think that's the other thing. We're losing sight of people being more than just vax, not vax, mask, not mask, right? And this is the root of a lot of otherisms, racism, sexism, fat phobia, that people are more than just one thing. And so if you don't feel comfortable being with someone who's masked, not masked, whatever it might be, that's your personal choice. But once you start judging that other person, you're really losing your own humanity, because you're not acknowledging all of them, which inevitably in some day you're not going to be able to acknowledge all of yours. Like we just know in psychology that if you judge other people, you're judging yourself even harder. So do yourself a compassionate, loving thing and stop judging other people. Focus on your own stuff, just like in divorce. Like I'm sure you have plenty. I mean, if you are someone out there who has nothing to work on themselves, give me a call. Let me know. I'd like to meet you as someone who's always working on all the things I mess up. You've got enough to do. Let that other, and also people never change until they're ready to change.
Yeah. That's you are not going to, I mean, those of us who have dealt with people with mental health or addiction problems, you are not going to tell your spouse to stop drinking and they're going to stop drinking because you want them to. Exactly. It's going to happen when they want it to, or it may never happen, but that's another story in another episode. But no, we can't control other people, no matter how desperately we try. And that's what it feels like right now, almost, that there's a desperation going on. And it's doing is really exacerbating the conflict cycle, as opposed to, bringing the conflict level down.
And note it, like, I'm so glad you brought up the word desperation. That's I haven't thought about that feeling. Like, that's something that if I get enraged about the situation, I'm going to start sitting with like, oh, because Susan reminded me, I feel desperate. Like, that's also a feeling you can sit with, which is like, I feel like I have so few choices.
Yeah.
I don't know, even saying it, I feel less desperate. Like just acknowledging it. Like, I don't have to take an action. It's when we take an action that we're not sitting with our feelings and knowing that it's okay to feel desperate. Like, it's okay.
It makes sense. We have fewer options right now.
Exactly. But maybe that means I won't be so cruel to the person who really also is desperate and doesn't have many options.
Yeah. And kind to ourselves. And, it always goes back to, I had a wonderful therapist many, many years ago who always told me awareness was the beginning of healing, right? If you're not aware of what your issue is or what the problem is or the feelings that you're having, and you're tamping them down with here's my phrase, it's fine. I'm fine.
Yeah, exactly.
It's all fine. Okay. Fine.
Exactly.
It's never going to be fine. And what's fine anyway, but he went into a whole thing, but his thing was always, you need the light bulb moments in your life. And so if recognizing that you're feeling anger, disappointment, desperation, any of those things in this moment in time, it's okay that you're feeling those things.
Absolutely. In 12 steps, they talk about awareness. I always love this: awareness, acceptance, action. Like, action is the last thing. Usually we act right away. That you want to be aware of how you feel, accept it, and then act, just as your smart therapist said. So action is really down the road. And that's something I really think about a lot, which is so much of my work, personal work, and my work with clients is about that awareness and acceptance space. It'll be super clear what to do with the action once you've gone through that, but you have to start there. I just did an interview yesterday with someone and they said, how do you know yourself so well? I thought, well, a very, very long time of pausing and noticing an action and asking, what am I feeling? Instead of just following that action, being thoughtful and reflective instead of reactive. And I think that's definitely applicable to divorce too.
Well, and it is so much that I'm sitting there and I'm looking at you. For those who are watching the video, your book is in the background, Light on the Other Side of Divorce. And being a big fan of the book and having read it one of the things that strikes me is there are tools, tips, and coping mechanisms and exercises in that book, although it says light on the other side of divorce, could be applicable to light on the other side of COVID, light on the other side of this, that, or the other. It's sort of a journey through trauma and healing.
Yes.
I suggest people go out and get it if you're having the issues that we're talking about today with COVID. Absolutely.
I think that's a really good point. I've had people reach out to me and say, I'm not getting divorced. I'm not, even married, but I'm using your book, their research supported tools to move through difficult feelings and to build more resiliency so that you can take care of yourself and therefore take better action. We've talked about how when you're going through a trauma, your frontal lobe, the part of your body and brain that helps you make good decisions, helps you think rationally and slow down is really not online. And so these tools in the book will help you with that. So also forgive yourself if you're noticing yourself being irrational, and everyone around you, by the way. This is for anyone who has children going back to school, I have to say a few things about this. One, I'm so sick of these pictures of like these perfect kids with perfect hair going off to school. Like, I want to have what does it look like a minute before? Like, nobody's perfect. Kids don't have to be perfect. Kids don't have to have their stuff together. This is a deeply transitionary time for you, for them. It's going to be messy, just like a divorce, just like with kids when you're going through a divorce. And you have a choice of either trying to get them to be okay and together in that forceful way, or embrace the mess and be like, the next 6 weeks, this is what I think to myself, are going to be messy. There'll be some fun times and there'll be some huge fights, and there'll be some messiness also, physical space. Like, I'm just going to accept it and acknowledge it and know that it's part of the process. Life is messy.
There's the sampler, everyone, to put on the wall. We always get one good like mic drop from Dr. Elizabeth. Life is messy. If you didn't know it, we are living in the middle of a teenager's bedroom right now, folks.
Exactly. And you can either acknowledge it and accept it and notice how you feel about it, or resist it. But I promise you, if you do the former, you will be happier and you will step into whatever this next stage is. Just like after divorce, we don't know. I keep thinking we're going to have this hindsight of looking back and thinking, remember during COVID? We're not there yet. We are in it. And so we will move through this. We will move through this together. The question is, are you going to be on your own side and really help you through it? Or are you going to be focused on everyone else? Same thing you and I talk about all the time about divorce. Are you going to put the focus on you or on your ex?
This is the time, as with all times of trauma, you, make it about me. Do your singing.
Yes.
Me. So thank you again, Dr. Elizabeth. I'm so glad we talked. I actually feel better. I had an anger explosion. I won't even go into the details of it, but somebody said something rude to my niece the other day, and I went nuts, like way beyond what you would normally see out of me. My poor niece was like, whoa, Aunt Susan is a little nuts. And I think it's just, I'm as caught up in everything as anyone else right now. So these tips are, as always, things that I'm going to take from our conversation and start applying to my life. Please let people know the best way to reach out to you, how to get the book. I mean, it's on my website, everybody.
Yeah,
it's all
exactly.
over.
It's all over Susan's stuff, as you probably know. But I really do want to recommend that people go to bookshop.com, which is a conglomerate of small bookstores, to get the book. It's Light on the Other Side of Divorce, Discovering the New You. And as we said, but really has tools and tips for healing through anything. And you can reach me and ask me any questions you want at drelizabethcohen.com. That's DR, and at The Divorce Doctor on Instagram. And I'm happy to support in any way that I can. And again, Susan, thank you so much for this important conversation, which I really don't get to have beyond my one-on-one sessions with people. So I love having this ability. And thanks for creating this space for your audience.
Well, I love it. I love our conversation. I love you. And I so appreciate the support you give my listeners, because I know the effect that you have on them. They reach out to me. They let me know. I just talked to a colleague last night who says she feels like she knows the two of us. And she was just talking. I was telling her about this episode, so I'm going to let her know it's coming. So everybody, as I will put, as always, all of the information in the show notes. But please reach out to Dr. Elizabeth, to me, and she'll be back. She will. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much.